a time, there was a boy named Doodle, and he lived in a castle with his friend, the not that good witch Melissa, and the balayer, and his 2 dogs, Arf and Paint. And there's a long story about how they all came to live together, but this is not that story. This is the story of how they met a new friend, the Princess Andromedieta Coma Solia Saltisaw, whose name I now know. And what happened was, one day, Doodle, baby, cute horsey. Sorry. Doodle and Melissa were hanging out in the kitchen. They always hang out in the kitchen. And they were drinking some tea and eating some toast. And Doodle said, you know, Melissa, it's a nice day today. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. Let's go on out for a walk and we'll take the dogs. And Melissa said, all right, that's fine. I need to get some dried toad's feet for my potion, so maybe we'll find some toads along the wall. So they went along, walking through the gardens and stuff. Melissa's castle was really big. It had been hers back when she was a knight of the realm. And so it had a lot of land and lots of different buildings and different stands of woods and all kinds of things. And they didn't explore all of it all the time. And on this walk, they went out into a park they really hadn't seen in a long time. And Doodle said, so Melissa, what part of your land is this? And she said, well, this used to belong to the old woodsman. But honestly, Doodle, I lost track of what happened to that woodsman. When I was a knight, of course, I took really good care of him and his family. And then when I was a bad witch, I can't remember if I put a curse on all their cows or not. I did so much stuff back then, I don't even remember. And Doodle said, well, you know, don't trouble yourself about it. Let's just enjoy our walk. And they were doing that, but they came by a crumbled old wall, like an old stone wall that was all falling down. And Paint started to bark and dig at the wall. And Melissa said, come on, Paint, but he would not come. And Doodle said, Paint, come on. But Paint just kept digging and barking, and he was digging so hard at the ground near the wall that he started digging a pretty good hole. And Arf started digging too, just to join in the fun. And finally Doodle tried to grab Arf by the collar and said, Arf, come on, this is silly. We can't stand here all day. But neither one of the dogs would stop digging. And Melissa and Doodle looked at each other and said, well, I guess there's something pretty good down there. I thought it was just a squirrel or something, but now I think it must be something down in the ground. And so they started scraping and digging too, but by then it was almost lunchtime, and their toast and tea had worn off, and they were getting hungry. And Doodle said, you know, Melissa, I'm getting kind of hungry, but now I'm really curious what's down in this hole, because they had dug down, like, you know, pretty good amount. Now, when Arf jumped in, he was almost covered up to his ears in the hole and spitting dirt up in the air and stuff. And the more the dogs dug, the more excited they got. So Melissa said, well, I'll tell you what. Why don't I do some magic? I'll fly back, get our lunch, we'll have a picnic lunch, and maybe I'll bring some shovels. And so then they were into a full excavation, which is when you dig up something cool and old. And it had to be old because nobody had been there for a long time. And so when she got back with lunch, she and Doodle went over. There was a stream pretty close by, and they went over and they kind of rinsed off their hands and stuff, and they ate a little sandwich. I think they had like ham and lettuce that day. And the dogs, meanwhile, lay down and got themselves wet in the stream, and they were panting. And yeah, that's right. And Doodle had remembered to ask Melissa to bring some dog bones, and so they ate dog bones for their lunch. She conjured up dog bones?
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't really dog bones because that'd be gross. It was like cow bones, which would be more what a dog would eat. So anyway, everybody had a good snack, and they were even more excited now that it was afternoon and it was time to really get down to digging. So they squared off the area with a piece of string, just like the real excavators do, and they started digging with a shovel. And they took off layer by layer by layer, and the dogs would dig, and then they would play in the mud, and then they would get in the water, and then they'd play in the mud, and they'd dig some more, and everybody was just having a great time. And finally, toward middle of the afternoon, Doodle's shovel hit something and went dink. And he said, "What's that?" And Melissa said, "Probably another rock." He said, "No, it's something else." Dink. And then Paint started barking and barking and barking and wagging his tail like Doodle had just gotten home after a week sailing on Pirate Elizabeth's ship, but he hadn't been anywhere. It was just this something they uncovered, but Paint was so happy. And they finally uncovered a corner of it, and it was like a square corner of a box. Only it wasn't like a wooden box or a metal box. It seemed like it was glass. It was so smooth. It was weird. And so they swept it away and they polished it off, and sure enough, it was a glass box, but they couldn't see in because there was no light in there, so they had to keep digging. And when they finally uncovered the box, they could not believe what they found. It wasn't just a little treasure box. It was an enormous, enormous big casket. And inside the casket was a beautiful young lady with curly, curly, curly black hair and pretty red lips, and her eyes were closed, and she had on a floofy dress that was totally rainbow colored, like it was silly. And she had a little smile on her face. And Doodle and Melissa looked at each other like, what? And Doodle said, gosh, Melissa, is she dead? But if you looked at Paint, you could tell. There was no way she was dead, because Paint was acting like his best friend just showed up. And he was jumping around, but, licking the box and everything. And Melissa said, uh-oh. And Doodle said, uh-oh. Melissa, is this something you remember a little bit? And Melissa said, well, Doodle. And they both sat down on the ground watching Paint dance around the box. As you know, back when I was the really, really bad witch Melissa, before you saved me and made me the not that bad witch Melissa, I did some pretty dark magic. And I have a feeling that this might very well be one of the people I bewitched and forgot about saving, because a lot of those times I forget. But now that I see this box, I seem to remember a story about a very magical princess who came from the fairy people. And she came down to visit, expecting to find her good friend, the knight Melissa. But instead I had been turned into a really bad witch, and I gave her a curse. And I think this might be her. Oh my gosh, said Doodle, that's terrible. No wonder Paint seems to know her if she was a friend of yours. Yeah, I think so, said Melissa. Doodle, this is going to take some fixing. I'm not quite sure what to do. Baby cow ready. Baby, baby. Hello, baby cows. I want a baby cow.
You do.
I want another baby cow. How come they get baby cows? Anyway. So then, Doodle said, well, can you unwitch her? Can you wake her up? Melissa said, Doodle, this is really strong magic. I don't even know if I'd ever be able to wake her up, but we can't leave her out here, said Doodle. No, no. And so Melissa flew back again to the castle and went and got the balayer and a horse and buggy, and they started to carry the casket out on the wagon back to the house. And when they got it back to the castle, they weren't quite sure what to do with it, because if they put it in the living room, they'd end up just like putting papers on it and sitting on it and stuff like a table or a chair, and that didn't seem very respectful. But if they put it in the kitchen, then they'd have a hard time getting around and finding places to eat, and it'd be the same thing. People would be like buttering their bagels on top of the casket, and that didn't seem right. And they didn't really want to stand it up because they didn't want the princess to like fall down. So they ended up putting her kind of in the front hallway, sort of sitting there, and just hoping the problem would solve itself quickly, because it was a big thing. Now Paint couldn't get over himself. He was so happy that that box and that lady were in the castle that he would sleep next to that box every single night, and every single morning he'd run out and use the bathroom and go get something to eat, and then he'd come back and sit by that box again. And he did this for like 3 or 4 days. Well, finally, Melissa, you see, as soon as the box came in, she went down to her basement. She had this sort of like dungeon, laboratory, arms place down in the bottom of her castle. When she was a knight, it was her armory where she kept all of her knightly weapons and gear. But then when she was a really, really bad witch, it was her dungeon, and you don't even want to know what went on down there. And now she just hung out there. It was kind of like a clubhouse. She did a lot of magic down there still. She hung out, listened to music and stuff. And she was down there trying to figure out what to do. And Doodle called down after about 3 days and said, Melissa, I really want take Paint out hunting. What's going on with that magic? She said, well, I got an idea. I guess we could try it. So she came up. Now the ballet wanted to see what was going on with this because he thought this is going to be exciting if we have a new person around. I just can hardly stand to see it. And so he put on his most sparkly pink stretchy suit and his most beautiful light blue tutu and his ballet slippers laced all the way up to his knees. And he got on point, as they say, which is when the ballerinas go on tippy-toe. And he was dancing around with his arms up above his head and doing these big leaps. Grand jeté is the big ballerina leap. And he was saying, marvelous, marvelous, this will be so marvelous. We'll have a new princess in the land. This will be great. And Doodle's like, I'm glad you're happy, Ballet. Do you remember this person? He said, of course I do, Doodle. This is the marvelous princess, Andra Minietta, Coma Celia Saltisa. And Doodle said, what? Andra Minietta, Coma Celia Saltisa. With his long mustache. She is the grandest princess magician in the world. She comes from the fairy people, you know. And oh, the grandest parties we would have when she would come, Doodle. I can tell you we would eat the finest foods and drink the finest apple juices and cocos. And oh, we would laugh. And Andra Minietta Comasalia Saltisa has a marvelous sense of humor, I can tell you. And then he went off dancing around again. And Doodle's like, gosh, Belair, I can't believe you didn't even tell us her name before now. And he said, you didn't ask, now did you, Doodle? I guess not. So, when they got down to it, Melissa got her magic out. And she said, all right, boys, stand back. Anything could happen here, because this is pretty dark magic to put such a powerful fairy princess locked up in this box. So, and now Paint wouldn't get back. They tried everything to hold him back, but he was just going to be there. And she said, well, we'll just do our best. And as she started working her magic, she used the dried toad toes that she got from their walk that day. And she put some other stuff in a pot that was simmering. It started to smoke all green and bubbly. And when it was finally like really, really green and red and blue with weird colors of smoke, she took the foot of a chicken and got some of it on there and sprinkled it on the glass. And the glass started to fizzle. And it started to fry. It started to get all fried up, and it bubbled away. And then, when it got all bubbly away, the glass went zink, and it turned into gray powder. And then the princess was covered in gray powder, but she was still just there, laying there. And Paint started to try to lick her face, but the powder made him sneeze. And so the not very good witch Melissa made a little breeze and blew it away, and then it was all over the house. And then the ballet got upset because everything was a mess, and he had just polished for his princess to come back. And anyway, so they finally got the house cleaned up, and now there's no casket. Paint's laying on the belly of this poor princess who's not awake, and that's how they are. So they're like, now what? And it went like that for a long time. They didn't know what to do to help her wake up. And that is when there was a knock on the door, and Mike the Builder came by. So I'll catch you up with Mike the Builder, okay? See what happened was Mike the Builder came by one day because he needed some help from Melissa. He had this old hatchet for a long time, and a long time ago a fairy princess had put an enchantment on it as a joke and made it so it only chopped purple wood. Well, it's not that it would only chop purple wood, it's just that any wood it touched would turn purple, and then anything you made out of the wood would be purple and stay purple. So he had purple chairs, purple parts of his house, purple dowels in his furniture, he had purple outbuildings, all kinds of stuff, and he was sick and tired of it because there's not that much of a market for purple wood, really. And he was trying to make a living, and he thought, well, that princess is long gone, but at least maybe I can get this. Get this sun right here. Is that better at all?
No.
At least maybe I can get this, the witch Melissa can fix my axe. So lo and behold, Mike walks into the house, and he sees the fairy princess all lying out there on the floor. He says, what? What's she doing here? And Doodle said, come on into the kitchen, Mike. I'll explain. And they sat around in the kitchen, had cookies and lemonade, and Doodle told him what he could about it, how strange it was. And Mike said, oh, I see. Well, I'll tell you what, Doodle. If you don't mind, I'd like to try something, but I really want to get your permission first because it might seem disrespectful. Doodle said, well, what? I said, well, you know all those stories about the princesses sleeping and then like somebody comes along and gives her love's first kiss and she wakes up and Doodle's like, oh, gross, Mike. And Mike's like, I know, but you see, Doodle, I always really liked Princess, don't tell me, como minieta salta.
Androminieta como Celia Saltiso.
I always liked Princess Androminieta como Celia Saltisaw a lot, like in that special I like her kind of way, and I wonder if I just gave her a little kiss, you know? And Doodle said, well, why'd you like her for? And he said, well, you see, it's just that, look, I gotta try this, I can't wait. So he went out into the hallway, and the ballet was at the top of the stairs watching, going, how romantic! And Melissa was standing there kind of like, great, you're going to kiss her. I've tried all my magic for 3 weeks. I broke my nails doing magic, and you're going to kiss her, and she's going to wake up? Right, Mike. You're a builder. Get back to your own job. But Mike leaned down, and he gave her a little kiss on her cheek, and her eyes fluttered, and she opened them, and she woke up, and she said, Melissa, you witch! And Melissa said, I gotta hide. She ran downstairs as fast as she could. And so that left Doodle and the balayer
He said, where am I? Get me out of here.
To try to explain what was going on, all of which was made much more difficult by the fact that Paint just about turned himself inside out, jumping up and down and yipping and yapping, and he was so excited and happy. And of course the princess, Androminieta como Saltisalia. Androminieta como Celia
Saltiso.
Androminieta como Celia Saltisaw was so happy to see Paint. Turned out that Paint, while Paint was Doodle's puppy, Paint's mother was Androminieta como Celia Saltisaw's dog. And so Paint knew her from way back, and that's what that was about. That's why his name was Paint, because she was the color fairy. Get it? Anyway, so she was all happy, and Mike was just sitting back in a chair looking at her like with the big love eyes, like, oh, she's awake, oh, and he didn't say anything else.
The ballet said, oh, how romantic.
Yes, and the ballet was like, oh, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. It was love's first, because Mike came and covered his mouth and said, isn't it great she's awake? And the ballet got it. He's like, So he didn't say anything else about that. So it took a while, but finally Doodle explained to the princess that she had been put to sleep by a curse from Melissa, but that was when Melissa was a really, really bad witch instead of the good night. And now she was still a witch, but not that bad at all. And in fact, that Melissa had been working her fingers to the bone for days and days now, trying to undo her bad magic. And the princess got around to saying, well, you know, I guess I'll have to forgive Melissa for, you know, doing that bad magic, because now she's good again, Doodle. Thanks for saving her from being bad. I guess it could happen to all of us. And Doodle said, yeah, I guess so. And so Melissa came back up out of the basement, and they were friends and everything. And Mike, like, was still really, really shy around the princess. He didn't, you know, want to hug her or love on her or anything like that. And everybody could tell that Mike did not want the princess to know that he was in love with her, and that he had woken her up with a kiss. So nobody mentioned it. They figured that's Mike's business if he wanted her to know. And the princess, so the princess said, well, I'm going to have to tell you guys a little bit about what I've been doing, you know, before I fell asleep. But I have to tell you, the end of the story is that I need a place to stay. And I'm wondering, do you mind, Doodle, if I stay here for a little while I get myself sorted out? And Doodle said, no, princess, by all means, just grab a room somewhere in the castle and relax for a while. And, you know, you can hang out and we'll make sure you get back on your feet again. That's what this place is all about. And Princess Androminieta como Celia Saltisaw said, thank you, Doodle. As the fairy princess, I thank you. And that is the end of this installment of the story.